All right, it's Wednesday, 11:30 a.m., and here I am parked across the street from the Piccolo Motel. I've been waiting for my wife of 3.5 years to arrive. Supposedly, she's meeting Glenn Eversham in room 145 at noon today. Glenn, an old high school boyfriend of hers, is someone I know pretty well. Well, at least he used to be one of my friends. But that's just how things tend to go, isn't it? Glenn was Ellie's first love. Ellie is supposed to be my wife, but I'm starting to doubt that. Glenn and Ellie dated throughout high school, and he was the one who took her virginity shortly after we all graduated. Yeah, I remember that night vividly. Glenn was bragging about it, boasting about how he got her. He had this big 4x4 Chrysler truck with a cap over the bed, and he always had blankets and stuff in there. Glenn was always prepared. The jerk told us all about it one night after work. It was the summer after we graduated, and we were hanging out behind this tavern called the Whiplash. It's a furniture store now, but back then, it was the place to be. I can still hear him talking like it was yesterday. He said, "I got her after prom. She changed out of her gown at her cousin's place and was wearing this black Harley-Davidson t-shirt and super short cutoff jeans. She looked gorgeous, long curly brown hair, big green eyes, and a tight body. I told her we were going to Jed Nelson's after prom party, but I said I wanted to stop by somewhere first to talk. I hinted that I might ask her to marry me. She was already drunk, so slipping a few granules of ecstasy into her beer was easy. In no time, she was ready to go. I got her jeans off, and she had the most beautiful pussy. You guys know she was a virgin, right? She was so small, hardly any hair down there, just a bit of fuzz. I had to work hard to get inside her, starting with one finger, then two, until finally, I just went for it. At first, she tried to stop me, but I kept at it until she gave in. She started to enjoy it, crying and moaning. You know I'm well endowed, so when she felt it, she went crazy. After a few more thrusts, she was all over me. I finished, and afterward, she just sat there on the blanket and cried. Didn't say a word, just cried. I knew I hit a home run. Eventually, she turned to me and asked what I wanted to say. I had completely forgotten, so I blurted out that I had enlisted in the Navy and would be leaving the following week. I pleaded with her to wait for me. Her tears stopped, and she said she would consider it. After that, I drove her home, kissed her goodnight, and left. Then I caught the bus out of town. We never did make it to Jed's party. I vividly recall him recounting his ridiculous story. I was there, on the outskirts as usual, hanging on every word. It tore me apart to hear it. Glenn, Ellie, and I, we all grew up together, attending the same schools from elementary to high school. Glenn was everyone's golden boy. He had the charm, the money, the athleticism, and, of course, the attention of all the girls. It's funny, he never really capitalized on what he had. He tried out for the football team but got cut. Basketball? Same story. Baseball? No luck. He always had an excuse. The coach was unfair, opponents played dirty, the umpires were biased. Yet, he always had the girls. He was crowned prom king senior year, and in the yearbook, he was voted most memorable guy. I dabbled in sports too. I'm Wyatt Templeton. I made the soccer team, skipped basketball, made the volleyball team, and played varsity lacrosse all 4 years. I guess it came down to physique. Glenn was big and strong, into weightlifting. Me? I've always been skinny. I couldn't compete physically in football, but I was fast. Coach noticed my agility in winter, which got me onto the volleyball team. And lacrosse? That was my thing. I played midfield. Yep, Glenn got the girls and the glory, while I got letters. Glenn partied hard throughout high school, excelling at it. I wasn't so lucky. My parents had 5 kids, so personal vehicles were a luxury we couldn't afford. I didn't have many dates, but I could always borrow my mom's beat-up Cavalier when needed. Did Glenn join the Navy? Of course not. Nobody bought that. After high school, he went off to Penn State, courtesy of his well-off parents. I focused on academics, earning a partial scholarship to a local state university. It didn't take me far. I had to promise to teach in-state for 3 years, landing me a job as a public school teacher. Teaching means living on a modest income. Don't know why, but I stuck with it. I guess I just enjoy working with kids. Glenn graduated, went to law school, and landed a lucrative job at a big law firm in the city. He claims he makes tons of money now, 5, maybe 10 times what I do. I check my watch, it's 11:40. Won't be long now. I'll find out soon enough whether I have a wife and family or not. This sucks. This really sucks. So, Glenn went off to Penn State, and I stayed behind. I'd always harbored feelings for Ellie Colleen Templeton, née Cochran. Ellie graduated and enrolled in community college, where she took classes in computer programming and software development. I never quite grasped all that. To me, computers are like cars. I know how to fuel them, start them up, and when something sounds off, I just crank up the radio instead of worrying about it. Sure, I've read all the manuals on car maintenance. I understand how they function, but fixing them is like tackling plumbing issues. It usually ends up worse than it started. I recall when we moved into our house. Ellie wanted a dishwasher and a new sink and countertop. I did some research, bought the equipment, and attempted to install everything myself. It seemed straightforward: turn off the water, cut the pipes, solder new ones in place. But try as I might, I couldn't stop the copper tubing from leaking. Ellie called her dad, and he came over to fix it. Her dad patted me on the shoulder and commended me for trying. Ellie brewed a pot of coffee, and we all sat down for a cup while she expressed how proud she was of my efforts. I felt foolish. I couldn't seem to get anything right. But in a strange way, I also felt gratified. I enjoyed the praise. Meanwhile, Glenn was off at Penn State, making a name for himself. He became president of his fraternity and a cheerleader for the Nittany Lions. I made my own mark too. After my freshman year, I made it onto the dean's list every semester while juggling part-time jobs year-round. Glenn returned home each summer, spending his days surfing and romancing every girl in sight. As for me, I had my own victories. I'd been trying to muster the courage to ask Ellie out. It happened between our freshman and sophomore years. Ellie and I had always been close, chatting and hanging out since childhood. Truth be told, I'd always been in love with her. I even kissed her once in high school. I remember her blush vividly. It took all my courage to kiss Ellie Cochran. It felt like climbing Mount Everest. She blushed, then kissed me back, but afterward, she made me promise not to tell Glenn, and that saddened me. I nearly confessed my love for her before she stopped me. What a fool I was. And then came the big moment, my date with Ellie. She finally agreed to go out with me. Well, let me rephrase that. I finally mustered the courage to ask her. She said yes. We decided on a fancy seafood restaurant in the countryside called the Seaman's Harvest. I wanted to treat her to something special before catching a play in the city. Cats was showing, and I thought it could be a memorable experience. I mentioned before that I wasn't much of a car person. I had bought a used Hyundai with high mileage, but the salesman assured me it was reliable, with at least another 100,000 miles left in it. For the first 2 weeks, it ran smoothly. When I picked up Ellie for our date, she looked stunning. She wore a pale blue mini dress, flesh-toned stockings, and high heels. Ellie stands at 5 feet 6 inches, while I'm 5 feet 11 inches, but with her heels, she was slightly taller than me. I always felt a bit awkward around Ellie. Usually, I could talk endlessly, but with her, I'd find myself tongue-tied, lost in those big green eyes of hers. At her door, I exchanged pleasantries with her parents while Ellie grabbed her wrap. I walked her to the car, helped her in, and we set off. About 2/3 of the way to the restaurant, my new used Hyundai broke down. It just stopped. I checked under the hood, crawled underneath, but couldn't figure out the issue. Ellie got out and inspected too. She smiled at me. Looks like it's broken. Yeah, seems that way, I replied, feeling frustrated. I had reservations at the restaurant and tickets to Cats, but now my car had failed us. Ellie took out her phone and called her dad. He arrived about half an hour later, tied an old tire to the front of his car, and pushed us back to their house. I sat in my car, feeling useless, while he pushed. Ellie rode with her dad, and I felt like a total failure. Back at Ellie's, we had barbecue with her family and watched an old movie on TV. Later, she confessed that she had already seen Cats with Glenn in New York. That was the extent of our big date. Checking my watch again, it was 11:45. I questioned my choices. Deep down, I always knew Glenn would resurface sooner or later. I had hoped Ellie had moved on from him, but I was wrong. Reflecting on our wedding, I remembered how I convinced her to marry me after our failed first date. It was during the town carnivals, a year after Ellie had won the beauty contest. Despite being her escort, I knew she wished Glenn had been there instead. Sometimes, you just sense these things. As I mentioned, it poured, not just a drizzle, but a full-on downpour, soaking everything. Ellie had regular clothes, but for the parade and coronation, she had a special outfit, a lovely white mini dress. But then the heavens opened up. In no time, Ellie was soaked through her thin linen or cotton dress, becoming transparent. She was on a platform, and I panicked. I dashed off the platform, grabbed an older man's raincoat, older folks always seemed prepared, and hurried back to cover her. Unfortunately, the platform, painted with glossy enamel, became slippery in the rain. I managed to get the raincoat over Ellie but ended up tumbling backward off the platform, feeling humiliated. As Ellie sat on her throne, receiving the crown and scepter, she didn't glance my way but had a wide grin. She looked graceful and beautiful, yet I sensed she might have been amused by my mishap. After the rain ceased, we strolled around the grounds. Her dress dried, and my jeans were stained with grass, my shirt muddy. She looked regal, and I resembled the town fool. We wandered among the games, got pit beef, funnel cake, and ice cream. Later, I drove her home, and she thanked me with a kiss on the cheek. It was sort of a date. We had a few more outings after my car debacle, nothing extraordinary, just movies, picnics, and a swim at the state park with hot dogs. That summer felt special. Towards the end, Glenn resurfaced for a week, monopolizing Ellie's time. As far as she was concerned, I was invisible. Glenn Eversham, I loathed that guy. My watch read 11:50. It wouldn't be long now. How did I persuade Ellie to marry me? That's a marvel. You've heard of one-man dogs, right? Well, I guess I'm a one-woman man. Sure, I've dated others, but I always found myself comparing them to Ellie, and Ellie always came out on top. Men masturbate. I can't speak for others, but whenever I engage in self-pleasure, my thoughts are solely consumed by Ellie. Daydreaming is a common human activity, especially for men. Typically, daydreams fall into two categories, the conquering hero or the suffering hero. Regardless of the scenario, Ellie is always the focal point, flawless in every way. How did I convince her to marry me? From the end of our first summer together until my senior year, Ellie and I had an on and off dating situation. Given my limited finances, our dates were usually budget-friendly activities like demolition derbies, carnivals, and minor league baseball games. Ellie had a passion for horseback riding, a pursuit she took seriously. While I enjoyed it too, it was more of a hobby for me. Ellie always had her own horse, a luxury I couldn't afford. Glenn, on the other hand, always seemed to have everything, including a horse. I made sure to take Ellie to church whenever possible. It was a modest outing, but I saw it as an opportunity to demonstrate my character. We're both Methodists, known for our love of singing and food. Ellie's voice is captivating, and now she sings in the church choir, looking angelic in her robe. But this can't be happening to me. I proposed to Ellie during my senior year in the fall. Ellie had already graduated and secured a job at a local software company. She was skilled in computer repair and even dabbled in programming and game development, although I couldn't comprehend much of it due to my aversion to technology. Glenn's presence continued to irk me throughout college. He'd come home sporadically, whisk Ellie away on dates, and leave me feeling like the perpetual backup. When Glenn returned home for Thanksgiving of our senior year with Marcia Ashcroft, his new flame, it seemed like the final straw. Marcia was stunning, and Glenn proudly announced their impending marriage. Despite congratulating them outwardly, inside, I was determined that it was finally my turn. I swiftly bought a ring, concocted a plan, and headed to Ellie's house. With her brother away, I intended to propose in the cozy setting of their club cellar on a Friday night. I persuaded Ellie to join me downstairs under the guise of playing video games, a proposition she typically couldn't resist given her knack for winning. We made our way to the game room, leaving her parents and brother upstairs, and settled onto the couch in front of the large TV. Taking a deep breath, I knelt down, presenting the ring box to Ellie. But before I could say anything, she cut me off with a worried expression. My heart sank, fearing she might reject my proposal. Yet, to my surprise, she pulled me close and demanded a kiss, affectionately calling me a blockhead. As we kissed, Ellie began to undress me, swiftly removing my shirts while leaving her own clothes on. Her kisses trailed down to my chest, igniting a stirring arousal within me. Eventually, she leaned back, silently prompting me to make my move. Drawing closer, I carefully undid her blouse, admiring its light green hue that matched her eyes. Her bra followed suit, revealing her exquisite breasts for the first time in person. They were a sight to behold, perfectly shaped with delicate areolas and erect nipples. I couldn't resist caressing them tenderly, eliciting a pleasurable response from Ellie. Our intimate moment was interrupted by her brother's descent down the stairs, prompting Ellie to loudly send him back up. Even her father's voice echoed from above, urging her brother to return. With a sense of urgency, Ellie undressed me completely, and I followed suit, shedding all inhibitions in her parents' cellar. There, in the midst of vulnerability and anticipation, I experienced a transformative night of intimacy, marking my passage into manhood at the age of 21. It was a night of tender exploration, shared kisses, and newfound closeness between us. I had my doubts about Ellie's virginity, especially after hearing Glenn's story, but that night, she could have fooled anyone. It seemed like she was just as nervous as I was. While the books might call it something else, to me, it felt like love, pure and true. As I explored between her legs, I marveled at her delicate anatomy, knowing the terms but never having seen one up close. I kissed her tenderly, tracing along her enticing lips, confirming Glenn's claim about her almost bareness. Despite her initial dryness, she gradually became aroused as I caressed her, but when I attempted to penetrate, her small size posed a challenge. Ellie took matters into her own hands, pulling me close and expressing her desire for me to make her a woman. It was exactly what I had hoped for, and yet I was filled with apprehension. With trembling hands, I attempted to enter her, mindful of her discomfort. Despite my eagerness, I took it slow, trying to control my excitement to avoid spoiling the moment. It was a struggle, but eventually, I managed to penetrate her, feeling her tense up before gradually relaxing. Her whimpering and the sight of her biting her lip told me it wasn't easy for her, and seeing a trace of blood only heightened my concern. Afterward, we held each other close, tears mingling as we processed the intensity of the experience. In the quiet aftermath, Ellie's solemn request to see the ring reminded us of the commitment we had just solidified in the most intimate of ways. I retrieved the ring from my pants and held it up for her to see. She extended her left hand, and I carefully slid the ring onto her finger as she instructed. The diamond may have been modest in size, just a little over a quarter carat, but it seemed to sparkle beautifully in the soft glow of the lamp on the end table. She examined her hand, then turned to me with a serious expression. "This means no more for you," she said gravely. Confused, I asked, "What do you mean?" She met my gaze with sincerity. "From now on, it's just you and me, no one else." I reassured her, "Ellie, you've always been the only one for me." Her smile was reassuring. "I know, it's been the same for me too." At the time, I didn't fully grasp what she meant by her too, and even now, I'm not entirely sure. Shortly after, we got dressed and headed upstairs to share the news with her parents. As Ellie proudly showed off the ring, their reaction seemed more relieved than joyful. I thought I understood why back then, but now I'm not so certain. And so it began. Ellie and I were officially a couple, and we shared the news with all our friends who admired her ring and celebrated our happiness, including Glenn. That was in November. Young, in love, and unaware of potential complications, we planned a June wedding. However, life had other plans. By January, we realized we had a little complication on the way, due in July. We moved the wedding date up to March, and our first daughter, Jenny, arrived shortly after. That same week, I landed a teaching job in middle school math with the county and was also asked to assist with the girls' JV soccer team at the high school. As my watch neared midnight, I couldn't shake the apprehension looming over me. Soon, my world, filled with dreams and hopes for the future, could be shattered when Ellie meets up with Mr. Big Shot Glenn Eversham. I had read her emails. I knew what was about to unfold. Oh, those emails, those frustrating emails. Why had she left her email accounts open? Why hadn't she secured them with passwords? She had so many secret accounts and passwords, and I knew next to nothing about that stuff. This didn't need to happen. I didn't have to know. Had she left them open deliberately? Did she want me to find out? Was she that unhappy with me? Was I that terrible of a husband? I tried so hard. We didn't have much money, but I tried to compensate for it. I paid attention to her. I told her every day how much she meant to me. I tried to give her everything that money couldn't buy. Was it the sex? I don't think I'm a bad lover, but it's hard to say. Ellie is the only woman I've ever been with. I mean it, Ellie's the only one for me. I've never intentionally hurt her or done anything degrading. I've always tried to be gentle yet firm. I remember watching that Meg Ryan movie and learning about faked orgasms. With Ellie, I think I can tell when I've succeeded. I've always done my best to ensure she feels satisfied. There have been times when she hasn't wanted sex. When she was pregnant with Jenny and Craig, her back often ached. I'd give her back rubs. I'd massage her all over. I adore touching her. She's all I've ever wanted. Oh God, please don't let this be happening. Was I a bad father? Jenny's 3 years old, and Craig is still a baby. Sure, I raise my voice sometimes, but don't all men yell occasionally? I'm attentive to my kids. I read stories to Jenny. I give her piggyback rides. I try to emulate everything my parents did for me. I strive to be a good dad. I want to be like my dad and Ellie's dad. I work hard around the house. I help with dinner. I do the dishes. I mow the lawn. I assist with the gardening. I vacuum. I do whatever she asks because I want her to be happy. Whenever Ellie feels down, I'm always there for her. I don't run off to the bar or anything like that. I kiss her every chance I get. I love holding her in my arms when we're in bed. I first noticed her secret Glenn account about 2 months ago. I wasn't suspicious, just curious, I suppose. I opened it, and now I wish I hadn't. That bastard Glenn Eversham asked to see her. He claimed he missed her, was lonely and unhappy in his marriage, and needed someone to talk to. What a snake in the grass. Then I read Ellie's response. At first, she practically told him to go away politely. She didn't curse, she simply stated she was married, busy, and suggested he talk to his wife or a counselor if he was unhappy. But he persisted. He kept emailing her, pleading and whining. He claimed he needed her, said she was the only one who truly understood him. She resisted, but eventually, Ellie started reminiscing about their high school days and the fun they had before he got engaged to Marcia. She began recalling moments I was barely a part of. In short, she started breaking my heart. Oh shit, Glenn's here. He's at the door of the motel room. I've hunched down in my car so he can't see me. What am I worried about? I'm way across the parking lot. I watch as he glances around before entering the room I anticipated, room 145. He steps back out and pulls out his cell phone. He dials a number and starts talking. I bet it's Ellie. I bet he's telling her he's here. Oh fuck. My life is crumbling right before my eyes. Please, Ellie, don't show up. Good Lord, why am I so consumed by this? I've gone through her emails. I know how eager she is for this rendezvous. She's already crossed the line of infidelity, if not in action, then in her heart. If she doesn't break her vows today, she will eventually. It's heartbreaking. Reading it on a screen is one thing, but witnessing it, or starting to witness it, in person, up close and personal, that's a whole different level. Damn, it's noon already. Any moment now. I have 2 kids and a third on the way. Jenny was born in July, 3 years and 2 months ago. Craig came along last October, and lately Ellie's mentioned missing 2 periods. That's 3 kids with a woman who may be cheating. No, I can't say that. Ellie would never, but there he is, he's over there. It's those emails, those cursed emails. I wish I had never laid eyes on them. I'll give her credit. At first, she resisted him, then she sounded intrigued, then she started bringing up his wife, Marcia. Ellie kept reminding him about his wife. She said things, clever things like, "What about your wife? Why would you do this to her? Wouldn't it be better to talk to your wife? Marcia loves you, you should talk to her. Glenn, you need to talk to your wife." He always had an excuse. He said she didn't understand him. He claimed he never loved her, not like he loved Ellie. He insinuated that he thought Marcia was cheating on him. I have to give Ellie credit, she fought Marcia's battles for her. She couldn't have defended Marcia better if she were Marcia herself. But in the end, it didn't matter. Last week, Ellie gave in. She agreed to meet him, and now we're here. My marriage, my life, and likely Glenn and Marcia's marriage are all about to crumble. I haven't been idle. I talked to my dad about this. He agrees with me. He believes, like I do, that when a man and a woman agree to marry, they give themselves to each other. My heart, my soul, my life's treasure, and yes, even my body, no longer belong to me, they belong to Ellie. Ellie should understand, I don't want to control her, but she made the same commitment to me. She said it herself, no more, no more. Her heart, soul, and body belong to me just as mine do to her. She can't betray our sacred bond. She can't make a fool out of me, a cuckold. I won't stand for it. I'll endure alimony and child support for the rest of my life. I'll live in poverty, but I won't tolerate betrayal. I glance at my watch, it's 12:15. Glenn has checked the door 3 times. Ellie's late. I'm wondering, and I suppose he's wondering too. I pray, maybe she won't show up? If she doesn't, I'll confront her. I'll ask her about the emails. I'll try to make her see, to make her understand. We can seek counseling. God, I love her so much. I'd rather die than live without her. As I've said before, I'm a one-woman man. I can't exist without her. Being without her would be like being dead. Oh please, Ellie, stay home. Don't come. But what if she does show up? I already know the answer to that. If she does, it's all over. I won't tolerate it. I'll leave. We'll get divorced. I refuse to live like some pathetic loser. It's just not who I am. Oh please, Ellie, don't come. Jesus, it's 12:20. This is agonizing. I need to find out. I have to call. I grab my cell phone and dial Ellie's number. It barely rings once before she picks up. Yes, oh, it's you, Wyatt. Hang up. Ellie, what are you doing? Where are you? Wyatt, what do you mean? You know where I am. I'm home. Jenny's in her playpen in the living room. Craig's upstairs asleep. I'm ironing one of your shirts, then there's a pause. She asks, where are you? Aren't you supposed to be in class right now? I respond as firmly as I can, no, Ellie, I'm in my car. I'm parked across from the Piccolo Motel. I've been watching Glenn Eversham going in and out of room 145 like he's expecting someone. Are you sure you're at home? I listen. There's a brief silence on the other end of the line. Yes, damn it, I've caught her. Ellie responds, Wyatt, hang up your cell phone. Wait there. You know I love you. You know I'd never do anything to hurt you or risk our life together. Trust me. Just wait. Call me and let me know if you see anything. Now hang up the damn phone. I obeyed her instructions. I hung up my phone. Okay, I thought, I'll give her all the space she needs. The second hand on my watch kept ticking. It was 12:30. Something was happening at the Piccolo. What could it be now? I watched as two figures approached the door to room 145. One of them was Marcia Eversham. I didn't recognize the other person, but he was a man carrying something under his arm. He knocked on the door. Holy shit! Glenn opened it. The man handed him a large envelope and said something. I wondered what it could be. Marcia stood behind the man. As the man walked away, Marcia followed suit. Glenn started running after his wife. Jesus, what just happened? I decided to call Ellie back. I picked up my cell phone and dialed Ellie's number again. She answered immediately. What did you see? Ellie, I saw some guy give Glenn a stack of papers. Marcia was there. I saw Glenn chasing his wife across the parking lot. What do you think you saw? Ellie inquired. I hesitated for a moment, then it dawned on me. Ellie, you tell me. Wyatt, what you witnessed was the end of a very unhappy marriage. I was taken aback. You mean? Ellie scolded me from the other end of the line. You can come home now. And? Come home, honey. I'll explain everything when you get here. The resolution, appropriately in the third person. Wyatt had taken the whole day off, so he went straight home. Ellie was waiting for him when he walked in the door. He arrived just in time to see Ellie's mom loading his toddler daughter and infant son into her minivan. They waved at each other. He entered their front door, greeted by the familiar atmosphere of their older home, a fixer-upper, typical of young couples starting a family. Despite the modest appearance, it exuded warmth and love, reflecting the wealth found in their bond and growing family. Wyatt spoke as he walked in. Can you tell me what happened today? Ellie took Wyatt's hand and guided him to the sofa, an old piece from her parents' cellar, where they had shared intimate moments. She motioned for him to sit, saying, Please, have a seat, honey. Wyatt complied, taking a spot on the sofa. Ellie knelt beside him, beginning, I'm sorry, my love. You weren't meant to see those emails. I assume that's what upset you. He nodded, and she gently squeezed his knee. Let me explain. A few weeks ago, I started receiving emails from Glenn. He wanted to meet me. You can imagine his intentions. Wyatt nodded again. I tried to stop him, but he persisted. So, I reached out to his wife, Marcia. Their marriage has been struggling for some time, Ellie continued, squeezing Wyatt's knee once more. He's not like you, my dear. Wyatt leaned in closer, prompting Ellie to push him back gently. Marcia desires a family, trust, and love. She and I devised a plan. Those emails you saw were part of a shared account. Marcia has been responding, not me. As Wyatt leaned forward again, Ellie halted him. Let me finish, honey, gently pushing him back. Today was Marcia's way out. She doesn't want to ruin Glenn, but she seeks a better future. We've discussed it. She wants someone like you. What you witnessed today was her exit visa. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I never imagined you'd find it so significant. You and I, we're a team. And guess what? I'm already expecting our third child. Wyatt struggled with mixed emotions. Ellie, I've always felt like I was second best to Glenn. Back in high school and college, it seemed like he was your priority. I was always in his shadow. I feared I had lost you to him. Ellie began unbuttoning his shirt. Wyatt, remember our high school days? Brushing away a tear, Wyatt nodded. Do you remember all those soccer and lacrosse games? Honestly, I hated them. Lacrosse was so boring, and soccer? Well, let's just say it wasn't my cup of tea. But do you think I endured all those matches for 4 years because I enjoyed them? No, I was there to see you. Remember how we'd lock eyes during those games? I was always looking out for you, Ellie reminisced. Wyatt wiped away a tear and nodded. Yeah, I remember. Ellie continued, our first real date is still vivid in my mind. Your car broke down, and everything seemed to go wrong. But you handled it with such grace, letting my dad help. That's when he realized what I already knew. Wyatt nodded again, I thought. Ellie gently touched her husband's cheek. You thought wrong, Wyatt. You've always been the one for me. Remember when I was crowned the town's carnival queen? You were so clumsy yet charming. Every girl wanted to be with you, but you were mine. Wyatt asked hesitantly, but what about you and Glenn on graduation night? As Ellie undressed him, she responded, You believed him? You were there when I gave myself to you for the first time. It's always been you, Wyatt. No one else. Wyatt shifted, allowing her to undress him more easily. Your parents, that night, what about them? As Ellie knelt before him, she assured him they were happy, Wyatt. They'd been waiting for you to come around for years. They knew how much I loved you. So, what happens now? Wyatt inquired. Ellie leaned back, her husband's penis in her hand. After this, we go upstairs, you make love to me, then we go to my parents' house for chili. And after that? Well, we live happily ever after, just like in those Hallmark movies. And indeed, they did.